Zok the Heilige Mishnah. The Elu im Olu Yerd. Following list of Karbonis, if they're Olu, they come down. And I really misspoke because I said a following list of Karbonis. In fact, the following list are Yerdu because they're not Karbonis at all. Basar Kotche Kotchen. The Basar of a Kurdish Kotchen, which is never placed on the Mizbeach. It's eaten by the Kehanim. So therefore, it has no shaykhs to being on the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach is not coded. Ubasa Kachim Kalam, or for instance, the Basar Batoida or Shlomim that are eaten by the Bailam. Or Umoiser Ha'imer, the leftover from the carbon Oimer that's brought on the Mizbeach, but the rest of the Oimer is not put on the Mizbeach. Shtei Alechem, which is not put on the Mizbeach. Either it's eaten by the Kehanim, the Lechem Aponim are eaten by the Kehanim. Ushiyari Menachos, the leftover of the Menachos, besides the Kmitza, is eaten by the Kehanim. It's not made to be placed on the Mizbeach. The Keteris, which Rashi tells us, if by mistake someone put the Keteris on the Mizbeach Achitza instead of the Mizbeach Pnimi, that again has no shaykhs to the Mizbeach, and therefore the Mizbeach is not clear. What about a Tzemer Shabarosha Kvasim? They would put the whole head of the oila on the Mizbeach without skinning it. If there was wool on the head, that also is not does not belong on the Mizbeach, but that has a different rule because it's connected to the head that does have to be placed on the Mizbeach. Or Visar Shabiskanti Yoshim, the hair of my chinny chin chin. What Somois, bones, Gidden sinews, Karnaim, horns, Talofim, hoofs, Shabizman Shein Mechubarim Yal. If they're connected to the limb that is going on the Mizbeach, so you put them on the Mizbeach together. Shenemar Victor Koin Esakoil. But Pirshu, what if it was separated, or even on top of the Mizbeach, if it got separated, it says La Yalu. If it was separated from the limb before it went up to the Mizbeach, Lo Yalu, it should not be brought into the Mizbeach. Shenemar Basisa Eiloisecha Habasar Bada. What part of the carbon goes on the Mizbeach? The basar and the dam, not the bones, the hooves, and those other parts. Now, it's interesting to note, it's important to note, that our Mishnah is speaking about when the Aver is not on the Mizbeach. Right? It says, Pirshu lo yalu. If it was separated from the main limb, it should not go up to the Mizbeach. So we're obviously speaking about a limb with its hoof that's not on the Mizbeach, it's on the ground. Tanu Rabbanon, the Rabbanon taught us. It says, V'hiktir HaKoyin es HaKoil HaMizbeach. They include everything. L'rabbis ha'tzomois, v'agidin, v'kanayim, v'tlovim. Hey, thank you so much. Wow. Thank you very much. Without copy. I could do both. It's okay. Thank you very much. Wow. Nia Bidvari. Gewaltig. Yochel, you would have thought, Afilu Pirshu, even if they separated from the limbs, it says Victor Koyin Sakoil, so includes them as well. Talmud Leimer, Vasisa, Eiloisecha, Abasar Vada. Not Akoil, only the Basar and the Dam, not the Tlofim and the Kanayim, the Gidim, the Tzomos, those don't count. Frek the Braisa, Basar V'dam, if it were that discriminating, that only Basar V'dam and not all these other items, well then, Yochel, Yachloitz, Gidin, Vatzomois, V'yala, Basar, Lagab Mizbeach. You might think that even if it's connected to the limb, you have to sever it from the limb and only allow the basar to come up to the Mizbeach. As Rashi says, mitzvah mutalas alam. There's a mitzvah to cut off these pieces and only take the basar. Talmud loymar the hikta is a koil, which seems to be contradictory. How do we bring these two psukim together that we could follow the meaning of both of them? Mechubarin, if they're still connected to the limb, Yalu, thank you so much. Then you bring them up. But Pirshu, once they separated, Afilu hein b'rosh hamizbeach yerdu. So this brisa is referring to even if it's b'rosh hamizbeach. Our Mishnah said Pirshu loyal, but here it says Pirshu afilu hein b'rosh hamizbeach. If you have a limb with a hoof that's on the mizbeach and the hoof falls off while it's burning, yerdu afilu hein b'rosh hamizbeach. It comes down. Zok the Gemara. Man Tana the Shamet Lei. Who is the Tana of our Mishnah that says the Yomer Pirshu Yerdu, that if the hoof or the bone falls off, you take it off the Mizbeach? Zok the Gemara, the Tana is Rebbe. That's Rebbe. Because we're going to learn now, Machloikis, there are those who argue on this. The Tanya, the Hikter HaKoin es HaKoil, HaMizbecha, L'Rabbis, V'Atzomois, V'Agidin, V'Karnaim, V'Atlofim. Vafilu Pirshu, even if they separated, you leave them on the Mizbeach. Clearly, this Shita argues with our Mishnah and our Brisa. Because our Mishnah and our Brisa says, if they separated, you take them off. This Brisa says, they separated, you leave them on. So this Brisa, we learned that that's to tell you if it's separated. But this Brisa holds, even if it's separated, you leave it on the Mizbeach. So what's the pasuk that discriminates, that says Basar and Dam Dafkin, not others? What is that referring to? Loy Malach, that teaches you Ikule Oila Atamaxir. What if part of the Basar fell off the Mizbeach and it's partially burnt? You put it back on to the Mizbeach. But the Atamaxir Ikule Gidin Vatzamis. It was partially consumed and it fell off. That you don't put back. So that's what it's referring to. But if it's not ikule, if it's ready to be burnt, there you would put it back according to this Tana. Our Mishnah argues, like Rebbe says, Rabbi Omer, which is riba. Because of echad Omer vadam, which is miyat. How do you make these two work together? Mechubar and yalu. If they're connected, then they can be placed on the mizbeach. But Pirshu, if they were separated from the Aver that belongs on the Mizbeach, even if they're on the Mizbeach, you take them down. That's the sheet of Rebbe, and our Mishnah would be consistent with the sheet of Rebbe. Zok to Gemara, and there's a Shaila, if this Dibur Hamasel belongs here or not. Rashi mentions it belongs there. The Shaila is, if your goyers this Dibur Hamasel Pirshu lo yalu, so then your Abzer is commenting on the Mishnah. But if you're not goyers this Dibur Hamasel, your Abzer is commenting on Rebbe. The difference between Rebbe and our Mishnah is what I pointed out earlier. Our Mishnah is lav dafka speaking where it's on the Mizbeach, while the Brisa specifically says afilu hein b'rosh hamizbeach yerdu. So Zok to Gemara, Amar B'Zer, lo shanu, this halacha that we learned that the Amar Zok Rashi, Pirshu yerdu, if it was separated from the Aver, you have to take it off the Mizbeach. Umiu istu b'chlal kochim, but it's b'chlal kochim. That's ella shepirshu klape mata. If, and Tosha says it only makes sense to say we're talking on top of the Mizbeach. If a hoof fell off the fire, fell off the Aver, and it rolled away from the Marach. Aval klape maila, what if it fell off the limb over there on the Mizbeach and it rolled closer into the center of the fire? Keruve hu do akrivu leikol. That's getting closer to the Michael Mizbeach. That you wouldn't take off. So Tosha says it only makes sense to say that this discussion is on top of the Mizbeach. Because if it's not even the Mizbeach, what's the difference what direction it rolled? It's not closer to equal because it rolled towards the Mizbeach. So on top of the Mizbeach even if it's separated, where our Brayja says even on top of the Mizbeach, Pirshu Yerdu, depends on which direction it rolled into. That is what the Gemara quotes from Abzera. Right, the Gemara, it doesn't make sense. Vafilu Pirshu, Bitmiya. Zok Rashi. Vafilu Pirshu Bitmiya. Vamechuborin Yalu Hudakam. Davke Mechuborin Yalu. But non-Mechuborin, not Yalu. You take off. So I don't understand, Frank the Gemara, what's the difference in what direction it rolled in? If it's Pirshu, you should take it off to Mizbech. Amar Rabba, Hachika Amar. Zokt Rabba. Reb Zera is completely wrong. Reb Zera is completely wrong. And if anything, you could make the following distinction, definitely not a distinction as to whether it rolled in this direction or that direction, but here's a distinction that you could make. Loi shanu, that you take it off to Mizbeach, ela shapirshu la'achar shvika. That's only, Loi shanu, ela shapirshu la'achar shvika. That's when you would say that you leave it on the Mizbeach and it's or that you take it off the Mizbeach, but it still maintains its din of kachim. So it comes off the Mizbeach, but it's still considered kachim. You can't have enough from it. Why? Because at the time of the Zrika, it was connected to the Aver, and therefore it was a Nizrak together with the Aver and the Zrika, the same thing that the Zrika did towards the Aver. It made it Lach Mishal Mizbeach. Agav the Aver, since it's connected to the Aver, it'll make it also Lach Mishal Mizbeach. Aval Pirshu Kodim Zrika. But if even before the Zrika Saddam, the hoof, the horn, or whatever was separated from the Aver, so then the Zrika doesn't even go on it. And therefore, also Zrika v'sherisinu afilu lemebad minayu kata desakin. It becomes completely chulin, and you can even use it to make a handle of a knife. Let's see what Rashi says over here. Lo shanu to come a pirshu yerdu. However, umi isnu b'chla kachim, it's still kachim. Dr. Rashi, the kibon the b'shas rika mechubarin have. Since at the time of the zrika, it was connected to the limb. Koiv oson zrika lebizbech. The zrika makes it that this is now lach mishal mizbech. The chipirshu, even if later on the hoof falls off, and therefore you take it away, you take it off the mizbeach, but still have a lukachim psulim. It'll still be like kachim psulim. You throw it into a fire mechutz lamachna. It's not chulin. Of a pirshul ifnei zrika, the b'shas rika lab b'nei mizbeach oyu. It was not a ben mizbeach b'shas rika, so the zrika would not have had an impact on it at all. Legabe making it into nlach mishal mizbeach. Well, then the zrika is matter completely, like it is the meat of a carbon. Asoy zrika v'sherisinul edge. It's matter the hoof, bone, whatever it was, to go to chulin. To the point that you could even lemebet kata the zakini. What's the chiddush of that? The same way basar is completely free to do what it needs to do, which is to go to the mizbeach. That's where it's destined to go. The bones have been fully released for what they're useful for. That would be the hana of the kaihanim, which we'll see. The Gemara quotes the halacha from Rabbi Shmuel in just a moment to support this. So Nachama, if it was connected to the Aver when this Zrika happened, so it was part of the Aver that was going to be going on Mizbeach, that also is released to the Mizbeach. But if it wasn't connected to the Aver B'shas Zrika, so it never received the status of ready Mizbeach, because it was never destined to go to the Mizbeach, then the Zrika releases it completely to the Kayanim to have a no from, and they can even make a handle of a knife. So clearly Rabbah must hold like this Chiddush that was said over from Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, from the Tana Rabbi Yishmael. Nemar lo yiyah ba'oila. By the oila, the Torah says as follows: The Torah says as follows: the hikriv hamak v'akoyin hamakriv es oilas ish or ha'oila asher hikriv lakoyin lo yiyeh. So the koyin gets the or. The Torah gives it to him. The Torah grants it to him. V'nemar lo yiyeh ba'osham. It says the same comment by an osham. Kachadas ka'osham Torah achas lahem hakoyin asher yechaper boy lo yiyeh. So we compare the two. Ma'osham atzmoisav mutarin. Just like an osham, it's atzomais are mutar. Why are that atzomais mutar to the kohen? Because shaf b'sarai mutar. Because unlike an oila that goes on the mizbeach, the osham, the basar of the osham, is eaten by the kohen. So everything's mutar. Ma'osham atzmoisav mutarin, af oila, so too an oila, atzmoisa mutarin. And Shmuel learns from there that the bones you could use to make afilu kata the. Now, very interesting. Rashi asks a very interesting question. Why doesn't it become osir after a day, just like the rest of the carbon does? The meat of the carbon, the meat of an osham, would become noiser if the kohen didn't need it by the end of the night. So why would the bones have a longer life? For Rashi, v'imishum noiser the bisreifa, that would apply to the basar and not to the atzamos, because lo shayich noiser ela b'mina de barachila. K'dichsiv noiser mi b'sar hazeva. So the bones would not become noiser. Zoktamar mufti. We sort of made a gzeir shava from osham, but you could really ask a kasha on the gzeir shava. So therefore, it must be that the words of lo yi are extra. The loy mufni. You can ask a kasha on the Gzera Shava, who said just because Osham it belongs to the Kohen, who said that by Oila the bones would belong to the Kohen? Because I would ask a kasha, Mal Osham shkem b'sarei mutter. By Osham, the bones go to the Kohanim, because the meat goes to the Kohanim. But maybe by Oila, where the meat does not go to the Kohanim, maybe the bones should also be treated like Osham. And therefore, Lo Yiyah Yisei Ksiv. The lo yiyah is an extra word. Since it's extra, lemedin ve'ena meshivin. Now, the problem that I have with this is if you look at Rashi's lo yiyah yiseruhu, the matzil lemichlev arha oila asher hikriv lakoyin lo yiyah. So lo yiyah lamali. So lo yiyah is extra. So it's normally I think the rule is that if you have a gzera shava that's mufna mitzad echad, L'meidin and Meshivin. If it's the muftan from Shnei Tzadim, it's L'meidin and Meshivin. I think that's the rule, the general rule we learned. Rashi seems to say that only one of the lo yiyahs is extra. So therefore, it should still be L'meidin and Meshivin. But could be Rashi is just using the pasuk of Oila as an example. But maybe you could say the same thing by Asham. Kachatas Asham, Teres, Tarachas Lehem HaKoyin Asher Chaper Boy. Still doesn't have to say lo yiyah. Maybe the word lo yiyah is still extra, but that's a little bit. It could have said, could have just said lakoyin. It should have said lo yiyah. I'm not sure because Rashi doesn't say it. Does the article say anything about them both being mufna? Result gemar weiter. Mosiv Rav Adabarav. Atzomoy Skotchim. What does he say?
Hopefully, notes that it's questioned whether this one of the subsidiaries is or both subsidiaries. You don't say why the Gemara did not make this point here.
Oh, okay. So it is a shayla. Okay. And now I want to get a refund on my Mesivta. How come the article has an insight that the Mesivta doesn't include? Yeah. Okay, I'm happy because otherwise I was scratching my head on it. Motzav Rabada Barava. Atzamois Kedoshim Lefnei Zrika. The bones of Kochim before the Zrika, Ma'alan Behen, you're going to be Ma'al. La'achar Zrika, after Zrika, Ein Ma'alan Behen, there's no Ma'ila. Vishal Oila, which is what we've been discussing, Ma'alan Behen Loila. So that's fair, because we just said that if the Zrika occurred after the bone was already separated from the basar, you could even make a kata de sakina. Yet Rav Ada Barava says that the bones of an oila my allen bahen oila. So it's shver on what Rabba said from what Rav Ada Barava says. Zog to Gemara, Ema, let's modify this a little bit. Vishal oila, not my allen bahen oilam, pirshu lefnei zrika, ain't my allen bahen, just like Rabba said. Lachas rika, my allen bahem loilam. Beautiful. Upligo de Rabba Lozer. This halacha that we learned from Rabba would be inconsistent with what Rabba Lozer said. Dom Rabba Lozer, Pirshul of Nezrika, Moilin Bahet, which Rabba didn't say. Rabba says it would be Chulun and Gansen. And La'achazrika, Loi Nehanin, Veloy Moil, there's no din Me'ila on it. The Zrika would be Materit, but Midarbonon, you still not allowed to have an offer. So Rashi says, "V'loy mayalan Rabbi Shmuel the Gamar miloyi the Osham, the Osham pirshu la'achar zrika." And he'll learn that the loyia refers to after the zrika, unlike what we learned. Ba'ad basar ishtru b'zrika lakayadim. If it was connected to the basar by the zrika, then the zrika had an impact on it. It made it that it should be loy mayalan midarabon loy nehanim. But if it was partial of the Zrika will have zero impact on it, and therefore it's moil. Rabba, if it was partial of the Zrika still has an impact on it. It doesn't make it royal mizbeach, it makes it to go free. It becomes mutter to the kayanim. Rabba Lozo, no, if it wasn't connected during the Zrika, then the Zrika had no impact on it at all, and it remains mamish kochim that you would be moil. Beautiful. Zog to mishtavaiter. The chulon shepaku me'al gabe hamizbeach. Any Evorim. Rashi says Hanach Psulun Sha'olu. So you have a case of pigol, you have a case of lum that was on the mizbeach, and it popped off the mizbeach as sometimes in the bonfire things pop off. Lo yachzer, it should not be put back onto the mizbeach, as we said. Yerdu lo yalu. V'chein gacheles shepaka me'agab mizbeach. Even a coal that popped off the mizbeach. Lo yachzer, you don't put it back. Evorim shepaku mi'al gabe hamizbeach koidim chasos. What if they're evorim, and we'll see what condition they're in, how burnt they are, but they fell off before chasos? Yachzer, you put them back onto the mizbeach. Umoy alaben, and you'll still be moil. They're still not mutter. Rashidakati b'nei mizbeach. However, la'achar chasos, if after chasos they fell off the mizbeach, lo yachzer, you don't have to put them back. The ain moyalin bahem, and you're not moyal. Zok Rashi, the kimin the havalukim ukolim, we consider them completely consumed. Kedemafarish b'gemara, as the Gemara will explain, havalu davish and nasas mitzvasei. It's something whose mitzvah was already discharged, and something whose mitzvah was discharged. Ain moyalin boy. Kashem shemizbech mekadesh es haroyuloi. Just like we say, if you place something on the mizbech is koilet kacha kevesh mekadesh. The ramp is also mekadesh the evarim. Kashem shamizbech v'akevesh mekachin esaroyelahem kach hakelim mekachin. If you put something into a klesharis, it will also be mekadesh it, even though you weren't supposed to put it into a klesharis. So the Gemara is going to explain what case that is. Zog the Gemara heichidon. What exactly is the case of before chazois, after chazois, whether or not you put it back on the mizbech? Either is behu mamish. If it's not totally consumed yet, there's still meat left there. Well, then afilu la'achar chatzois nami. Even if it fell off after chatzois, you should be putting it back. It's still meat that must be burnt on the mizbeach. I need a less behu mamish. If it's fallen apart, it's all ash. Well, then afilu koydem chatzois nami loyi. You wouldn't put it back on. It's totally consumed. So, what level of burnt would chatzois control? No?
Not putting it back on, it should be meal.
Oh, it should be Mila, it's asking? Okay, Zok to Gemara, Loi Trich, you know what the case was? Bishridi. Bishridi means it's hard like a coal. There's not a drop of moisture left in this because it was burning for so long, but it's not like if you touch it, it's going to fall apart. It still is intact. As Rashi says, caution, it's hard. Siniskashu mak masa'esh shesholta bekulam v'nisrafu. It's not ash. Look at eitzim yiveshim hemi toichem. It's like a hard piece of wood. So that before, if this occurs before Chatzois, you got to put it back. If you yesh b'meila, and after Chatzois, you don't have to put it back. Ein b'meila. Where did you get this magical formula that Chatzois has this power to convert something from Meichel HaMizbeach to Chulu, from something sheyesh b'meila to davar shein b'meila? Rav, I'll tell you where I know this from. So let's look at the psukim. The psukim say as follows: Tzav es aharon v'esbonav leimor zois Torah sa'ila hiya oila. Where does it belong? Al moikta al mizbeach kol halayla. All night it should be burning on the fire inside on the mizbeach. Adaboik until the morning. Continuing on with the features of Kol Halayla, also Kol Halayla, so it has to burn on the Mizbeach Kol Halayla and Truma Sadeshin. The remaining ash left over from the burning shall be removed from the Mizbeach Kol Halayla, because there's no time change. It's continuing on to the same scenario of Kol Halayla that has the halacha of Olav Shakayin and the Herim Hasadesh. So Zog to Gemara, we seem to have a stira. It says, Kol Halayla v'hikter. All night long, where does the meat belong on the Mizbeach? It has to be burnt, not removed. Not removed. It's Torah because of Echaroimer, and the same pasuk referring to the same period of time says Kol Halayla, referring to the Kol Halayla in the first pasuk, the Herim in the second pasuk. So that means it's time to make Truma Sedeshin. It's not a time for Haktara. Zokt Gemara, what do you do? Zokt Rav, Chalkeyu, split it. Chetz of Laktara, let's say half the night is designated for Haktara. Zokt Rashi, the loy have an equal ilav deshen mamish. If you had this shariri, this meat that was burnt like a piece of wood, but it still didn't fall apart like ashes, if you have meat that's like nishtahi, nishtaher, that could go on either side, that's where Chatzois has its impact. Up until Chatzois, it's Laktara. But after Chatzois, when Chatzois passes, this now hard piece of charcoal becomes discharged, and it's time to make Truma Sedeshna. As Rashi says, even if they're hard, they're not completely falling apart like ash. It's time to use them for Truma Sedeshin, Ukriyan Deshin. It has a status. So if B'mitzias is Deshin, no matter when it's Deshin. If B'mitzias it's meat, no matter when it's meat. But if it's in this condition of Shriri, then up until Chatzois, it's called meat. After Chatzois, it's called Deshin. However, of course, when you Basar Mamish, Shalach L'Meimer to make Deshin. So this condition, where it's hardened, but it's not falling apart, that is what is controlled by Chatzois. Moshe Rav Kahana. Correct Rav Kahana on this distinction. B'chol Yom, the Brisa says, B'chol Yom Torah Mesamizbeach Mikrois HaGever, from just before daybreak, Oy Samuchloi Milafonev Oy Me'achva. A little bit before, a little bit after. B'Yom HaKippurim, where the Kohen Gadol does all the avodah by himself and he needs more time to work, Mechatzois. From Chatzois already, he starts making Truma Sedeshin. Biragolim, Yom Tov, where it's really, really busy and there's so many karbanos to process. Already from the first third of the night, they can start making Truma Sedeshin. If you hold that Chatzois is the time where you could begin to make Truma Sedeshin, how could you come before Chatzois to do Truma Sedeshin during the Yom Tovim? Before Chatzois, we just said, it is Manak Torah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zok Rabbi Yochanan as follows. Mimashma shenemar kol alay. It says kol alay. Eini yodeya, don't I know she'ad haboiker? Usually kol alaylo means up until the morning. And Rashi, unlike Tosfos, learns that Rabbi Yochanan is not arguing on what we said from Rav. Rabbi Yochanan is providing an explanation to Rav. So he says, when it says Kol Halayla, it surely can't mean, it surely means until the morning. That's what Kol Halayla means. So why did the Torah repeat Ad HaBoiker? Mata B'lam Ad Boiker. It must be to tell us Tein Boiker LeBoiker Shalayla. All night, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to do Haftarah. I'm sorry. All night you're supposed to do Haftarah, but the Torah also tells us to do. The Torah also tells us to do Haramas Hadeshin. So Zogt Rashi, Ma Tamdom Araboiker, Loy Nemer Elul in Haram. When it said Araboiker, it must be telling us Le'in Haram, because Kol Halayla is normally, as Rashi says, Mimash Nemer Kol Halayla, Im Lelamid Ba, Kimashma, Kol Amikra, Shehi Maila Ivar Umaktir Naraboiker, Mikol Halayla Naf. If the main focus of the pasuk is to tell you that Zman Aktar is Kol Halayla, all it had to say was Kol Halayla. Ad Boiker is obviously talking about something else. So Rashi Talmud Loimer Ad Boiker Loy Nemer Ela Le'in Harama. Ad Boiker is what the Torah is using to describe the Zman Harama. Loimar to tell us Shatorim Kol Halayla. Ad Boiker is not telling you can make Aktar all night. That we know from Kol Halayla. Ad Boiker is telling you could also do Harama all night until the Boiker. V'hachi Kamar Ad Boiker, even up until the morning, even in the night, the Hirim, you could make Trumas Hadeshin. Lefnei Boiker v'Hirim. Before the Boiker, you can already do Harama. But for Loinatan Shir Ladov. But it doesn't say when. So again, Matam Ad Boiker, Tein Boiker LeBoikroi Shalayla. Besides the morning, there's even an earlier point where you could make Haram. So it's a little bit fuzzy. You know for sure by day you make the Haram first thing in the morning or early in the morning. You know that. But there's an earlier time that the Torah is indicating to us that you could also make Harama, but that time wasn't really specified. It's just Boiker, the Boiker Shalayla. The Boiker Shalayla is normally Alois. Tein Boiker create a secondary Boiker that would even be earlier than Alois, where Harama would be allowed to make. But the Torah doesn't tell us what the time is. The Torah left it to Chazal to determine what would be appropriate. Sagi, every day, it's enough to do Haramas Hadeshin by Christ together a little bit before Alois. B'yom HaKippurim, B'shem Chol Shidei Gadol, Mechatzois. B'ergolim, the Nefishi Karbonos, the Kadmi, Osi Yisrael, Mashmar Sarishayna. There's so many people there, they could already start making Trumas Hadeshin to prepare for the Haktar Karbonos of the next day, already from the Shmar Sarishayna. Kedikatani Seifa, like it said in the Seifa, Lahoisa Kriyas Hagever Magas, by the time the rooster crowed, by the time Aloisa Shachar arrived, Azara Malayim Yisrael, it was already packed. Let's have a look at Rashi. Tein Boiker LeBoiker Shalayla. Boiker Shalayla, the normal Boiker of the night, is Aloisa Shachar. But Tein Boiker LeBoiker Shalayla, you want to add a secondary Boiker, because it says Ara Boiker, that's to tell us, Boiker Achar Teinlai Hainu Hashkama, even earlier than Aloisa Shachar. The Kivin the Ein Zman L'Tovar, Ela Shalashkama or Ela Hashkama. Since the Torah is just telling us there's an earlier morning, but the Torah doesn't specify when that is. Therefore, we say Akoil Lefi Tzoyer Chasha Yesh Biyot Chalasos. You start the Trumas Hadeshin process when you realize that would be a good time, because the Torah is giving you a variable condition. Boiker LeBoiker, you could start earlier as you see fit, depending on the need and the crowd. So therefore, to summarize, Rav did learn from Kol Halayla V'Hiktir, Kol Halayla V'Hirim, to tell you that you split it in half. That remains true. But there's another pasuk about a boiker to tell us that the harama could be done even earlier. You could start even before the night. But the Chalkeyu remains standing according to Rashi's Pshat, and still tells us that there's half of the night is the point where if you had this hardened type of coal meat that was burnt, but it wasn't completely consumed, it becomes mukal, it becomes mutter at chatzos. Zog the Gemara. Itmar, we learned a machlokes. Pirshu koydem chatzos. Now, up until now, we're saying that being on the mizbeach at chatzos transforms this shriri from meat into ikuls, right? It's considered consumed, that there is no more me'ilah on it. What happens if it wasn't on the mizbeach for that period of time? Pirshu koydem chatzos. You took it up after chatzos, where at that point Allah would have been you got to put it back on. But v'chzir nacha chatzos, it passed chatzos while it was off the mizbeach, and you're putting it back on. The question is, did chatzos do its job on this piece of meat, even though it wasn't on the mizbeach during that period of time? So Rabbi says, chatzos sheni achlason. It missed the boat with the first chatzos. You got to wait till tomorrow night. It will become, unless it becomes totally ash, it will remain also b'me'ilah until the next night chatzos, because it has to be on the mizbeach to receive the impact of chatzos. There's actually a second chatzos that happens by Amud HaShachar. You're not going to wait till tomorrow. You just got to leave it until the morning. Army Bay Rebbe, my time with Reb Chisda. What's as far Reb Chisda, who says that Amud HaShachar acts just like a chatzos? It's a kavachomer. Uma chatzos she'ein oisalina. Ma de chatzos that would not create a psolina. Lina only happens in the morning. Nevertheless, oisa equal, as we said earlier, it makes the shriri mutter. Amud HaShachar she'oisalina, surely ein idin she'oisa equal. So therefore, Pirshu koydem chatzos v'chzirin la'achar Amud HaShachar. So it missed both buses, and missed the chatzos bus, and it missed the Amud HaShachar bus. Rabbi Omar chatzos sheina echlason. You for sure have to wait till the second chatzos. Chisda Omar ein behind equal oilam. If it missed both buses until it's completely ash, it will remain aser n'chai b'me'ilah. Maska Flor Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef asked, where in the world did you get this from? That chatzos only impacts this meat only if the meat on the mizbeach mechatesa. Uman leimalon the chatzos v'roish hamishbeach mashvu liikol dilma kalecha de mishkacha lehu mashvu liikol. Maybe chatzos is matter no matter where it is. Who said it has to be dafka sitting on the mizbeach? So Zok Gemara sholchu mitam. I'm sorry. No, Rabbi has to be on the mizbeach. Right? You get chatzos sheni echlason. If it misses chatzos, you got to wait for tomorrow night. Reb Chizda says Amud HaShachar echlason. You have a second chance at Amud HaShachar. Rabbi says if you miss the bell, so you got to wait till tomorrow night. Reb Chizda says you only have to wait till tomorrow morning. Rabbi Yosef says you don't have to wait at all. It still experienced chatzos, so it wasn't in Times Square. It still experienced chatzos. So the Gemara sholch mitam milchus Rabbi Yosef. We pass like Rabbi Yosef that chatzos is matter shriri even if it wasn't on the mizbeach. It mainami amar chibar abba perishu koydim chatzos v'chsir nach chatzos loy nehelen v'loy mayalen. So it's only also midirabanon, but there's no din meila. So clearly chatzos did its job. V'chein tana bar kapara perishu koydim chatzos v'chsir nach chatzos yoytzin midei meila. So Amar Papa, so our Papa said, Rabbi, so let's think about this. We already know from Yerushalayim, from Eretz Yisrael, that means it doesn't matter if it was on the Mizbeach or not. And he also said that Chatzos does its job even if it's not on the Mizbeach. So then the Rabbah Reb Chisda, what is the whole point of Rabbah and Reb Chisda's machlokes? It's not relevant. Because there's no such thing as missing chatzos. Their machlokes would be if it was very, very fatty meat, so Rashi, even if they became shriri and they became hard, loy have a ikol, that wouldn't be ikol, and chatzos would not be materit. The shumnom ma'akvin milei asais deshen. Since they're so fatty, they will not become deshen. But if they were on the mizbeach, at Chatzois, it would be matered, and that's where they were arguing. Okay, I guess we could stop here and we'll be Mamshech Bez Hashem tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
We only have two